Let's start first with an overview. Former Public Enterprises Minister Lynne Brown has denied the claims that the 2014 Eskom board was a Gupta board. Brown dismissed the allegations, saying none of the board members had direct links to the controversial Gupta family. She was testifying before the Commission of the Inquiry into State Capture sitting in Johannesburg.
Now you have got the opportunity.
Lynne Brown maintains the selection process for the 2014 Eskom board was transparent. Asked about the inquiry discussed at former President Jacob Zuma's Durban home, Brown said she was for the inquiry into Eskom affairs. However, she said she does not recall discussing the suspension of 4 executives and dismissed allegations she instructed the board to suspend the executives who were allegedly replaced by Gupta-approved individuals.
If they were there, as long as they were not involved in the investigation, that would be fine. If they were involved in the investigation, it would not serve us. I don't think it would have served us well. So, did I want them to step aside? Not necessarily. If they stayed on, it would have been fine. If they were asked to step aside for 3 months in the interest of stabilizing the company, that would probably also have been something I could have alluded to.
Brown testified Eskom was in dire financial difficulty when she became minister. The power utility had a debt of 180 billion rand, which had risen to 260 billion rand when she left cabinet and now sits at over 400 billion rand.
Eskom was in dire financial straits. It was in dire straits in terms of load shedding. I mean, I think I was called the minister of load shedding, even though I had other portfolios in my portfolio. I was called the Minister of Load Shedding. It's nothing compared to what is happening at the moment. Nobody's blamed at the moment for any of this load shedding.
Asked about oversight, Brown said oversight was done by the department's DG and DDG and not the minister, adding that a minister could only exercise oversight based on the documentation presented by the department's officials. Lynne Brown, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, so the State Capture Commission has been hearing from the former Public Enterprises Minister Lynne Brown. We heard her there, as well as the current Minerals Minister Gwede Mantashe. Of course, Brown has been accused of putting people into key posts to extend the influence of the Guptas and lay the groundwork for state capture, but she's denied those claims. Let's chat now to Corruption Watch's David Lewis, who's been following proceedings for us. Thank you for being with us, David. So Eskom was fundamentally harmed, some would say, under Lynne Brown's watch. The people accused of state capture, sometimes her appointees. Was that why this was such important testimony today?
Yes, I mean, you know, she was a minister at a critical time during the whole state capture process. I mean, you know, I think that Lynne Brown did what she was ordered to do. She really should never have been under any regime Minister of Public Enterprises. And I think, you know, even in that little clip that you played, she demonstrated the kind of minister that she was. Well, if they stayed on, it wouldn't have mattered. If they left for 3 months, it wouldn't have mattered either. You're talking about, I think, 3 or 4 senior executives of Eskom. So she was really a very sort of underwhelming minister who I think was placed in that position because she was pliable and compliant, and that's what she demonstrated. And she demonstrated that in that really peculiar statement about it made no difference whether they were there or whether they weren't there. I would have lived with either of them.
So, but more importantly, I mean, the claim is that she was putting people in place for the Guptas to capture the state. How do you think she fared in sort of fending off those huge claims?
Well, you know, the boards and the Eskom boards at the time of her regime were a very odd collection of people who you would never have expected to surface on the board of a complex organization like Eskom. And I'm sure she placed on the board whoever she was told to place on the board. You know,
So who was doing the telling? Who was doing the telling?
Well, either the Guptas were doing the telling, or Zuma was doing the telling, or somebody more powerful than her. She was not a powerful person in the ANC particularly. She was not a powerful person in the government. She has no record of knowing anything about economics or the management of complex organizations or, energy production and supply. And so I really, I know this is an odd thing to say, but my impression about Lynne Brown always is that she followed orders. And she was placed in that position for that very reason. And, whether she generated any of the names of the people who actually ultimately served on that board or not, I don't know. But I suspect that she didn't. I mean, these were not well-known people. They were not particularly highly regarded business people. They were not great experts in energy. Several of them were associated with the Guptas. I don't agree with what she says about that. But I'm quite certain that the names were given to her and she signed the government gazette or whatever it was that she had to do. And that's the kind of minister she was. She wasn't a minister like there were several other corrupt ministers. She wasn't a minister like Zwane or Gigaba, who were, themselves ambitious, I think, politically. Who may have, had their own views about who would have served the Guptas or who would have served themselves best. She just seemed to me to be a rather sort of ineffectual, sort of yes woman.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about Gwede Mantashe. He's also on our screens. He's testifying right now. There's an issue about who paid for his security. We've heard all about this before. He says Papa Leshabane, who was a Bosasa exec, offered to pay for some cameras. And that wasn't an issue at the time. All the Bosasa issues weren't up. He didn't even know if the executive was paying out of his own pocket. He didn't ask. Firstly, I guess politicians have to be careful about accepting gifts and about declaring, although he was in the ANC at the time, not a minister, I understand. What should have been done in that case? How should he have handled that offer?
Much more carefully than he did. I know Minister Mantashe from way back, and he is the last person I would have ever thought of to be involved in any sort of dodgy business like this. And now a couple of things have surfaced, this being one of them. And it's disappointing because, of course, he should have been careful about that. He wasn't a minister, admittedly, and maybe not subject to the Executive Ethics Act or whatever it's called. But he was a very, very, very powerful person in the governing party who could have influenced, decisions of the government. I have absolutely no doubt. And so he should have been a hell of a lot more careful. I mean, he's really got something to answer. I mean, all of those who accepted free security systems from Bosasa have got things to answer. And besides which, it's been known for a very long time that Bosasa was involved in sort of dodgy relationships with government.
Yeah, and like you say, that influence, he's also been asked about claims that he was there. Barbara Hogan said he was there when former President Jacob Zuma fired her. Final question, because we're running out of time. The State Capture Commission, I guess the end is in sight, barring an extension or two. How useful do you think it's been for South Africa?
I think it's been very useful. I mean, obviously for somebody who's daily life is this, it's been very useful in terms of the information that has come across. But I think that it has enlightened South Africans as to what went on and how it went on. And I think it's been a very important learning experience and a very important coming to terms with the kind of regime that we lived through for 9 years and hopefully won't have to live through again, because people will have learned some lessons, and they will when the report comes out as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess it's also dependent on how that report is handled very quickly.
Yes, and I think it does need to be handled quickly. I think its recommendations need to be assessed quickly. The public need to be educated about it, and we certainly have played a role in trying to educate the public about the Commission during its sittings, and we'll do that subsequently as well, because I think it's very, very important to learn the lessons that will undoubtedly be communicated by the Commission's report.
All right, thank you for being with us, Executive Director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis. Now, the National